Today I'm with the author of this book entitled Mountain Tables, and it is Michael Dewey. Hi Michael.
Hello.
How's things, all right?
Fine, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
So, but I mentioned the book, Michael, and of course, did that come out in 1995?
It was published in 1995, and I've been actually walking over the hills probably for the previous 20 years to that, and I slowly built up the 2000s, and I was using Bridges' list as my list for actually climbing the tables, and I found over time that this, as new maps were published, and also not only published but actually they were metricated, there were a lot of errors and a lot of tops that were not included in Bridges' list. So I thought that this had to be rectified, and we needed to bring a correct list of the 2,000 metre tops. Now we have the 2,000 metre tops because it's historically important. The first list was published, I think it was about 1905, by a chap called Rook Corbett, and it's been published, there have been a number of publishers ever since. And Bridge published his book in 1973, as I said before. So this had to be improved, and it's been evolving ever since, and it's still evolving today. And as I completed the 2,000 foot tops, I felt it was important that the 500 metre tops, or the hills and mountains below 2,000 feet, were very important and very scenically interesting. So I thought we ought to develop a new list, and I thought, where do I start the list? What is going to be the lowest height? And I chose 500 metres because all the maps had been metricated, so 500 metres became the new lowest height for my new table list. And it's been developing since 1995. Originally there were 373 tops within that list, and it has evolved today to a total of 435 within the 500 metre tops. And to qualify as a 500 metre top, it obviously must be a maximum of 500 metres, but it goes up to a height of 2,000 feet or 610 metres. I have chosen a height difference of 30 metres between one top and another top to really remove all of the inconsequential bumps between tops. And we have now ended up with quite a reasonable list, and it will take people to fantastic parts of the countryside that probably you'd never think of going, and it really is worthwhile attempting some of these tops.
Was there any specific reason, Michael, why you chose 500 metres?
I had to start somewhere, and I felt we had to start with a minimum height, and 500 metres seemed to be a reasonable height. And if you go below that, we bring in so much extra land that is not really mountainous or high moorland. So we now have a list which is not only mountainous but high moorland, so it really excludes a lot of the lower hills like the Cotswolds and the Mendips and things like that.
Now, as far as the separation criteria is concerned, you mentioned the 30 metres.
Yes.
Am I correct in saying that you did contemplate at one time, because of course the list that is published in the mountain tables, that's for the hills of England, Wales and Ireland. I apologise, England, Wales and the Isle of Man.
Yes.
Did you contemplate using a criteria of 15 metres or 50
Yes,
foot?
Originally I started at about 10 metres.
10 metres?
Yes, I kept the original qualification of the 2,000 footers, which is 10 metres. But the list became impossibly large and meaningless, so I had to increase it. And to come out with a list that I thought was realistic, was 30 metres, and it has actually today has worked very well indeed.
And of course there are quite a number of people now looking at the Deweys.
I'm very surprised at
that. It's almost a similar basis, I think, for England and Wales when you consider the Munros, because many Munroists then go on to the Corbetts.
That's correct indeed.
I think in England and Wales many people that have completed the 2,000 foot mountains then look at the...
Go and further on, and it just keeps you going as the years go by. It just keeps you going with more fantastic countryside to explore.
When did you start compiling the 500 metre?
Well, I really started as soon as I completed the 2,000 footers. That was probably about 1992, 93. I then thought I'd better start doing this new list, 500 metre list, and I started walking the 500 metre hills, and I had a fantastic time doing it.
Now, as we said before, it was published by Constable in 1995.
Yes.
When you compiled the 500 metre list, did you do it purely by sort of hand, or did you do it instantly onto a sort of a keyboard and a
Yeah,
computer?
initially it was by hand, but I mean computers at this time were coming in, so I bought a very, very cheap computer, and it worked. And basically, initially it was paperless, but it soon went onto the computer, and obviously with computing, life is a lot easier and more efficient.
Does the paper list still exist?
No, they don't.
Oh, they don't? Oh,
no,
Michael.
they went very early on indeed.
So, now, obviously, you did have your own website at one time with the lists on, didn't you?
I did indeed.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think you can still access that via the web archive.
That's right indeed.
Now, as far as the compilation of the list itself, what scale map did you use?
I initially started. I started with the 50,000 maps, the Land Ranger map, but they're just not accurate enough. And you've got to go to the outdoor leisure maps, the 1 to 25,000, and you've really got to concentrate on those maps entirely.
Did you ever consult the 1 to 10,000 base map or not?
I have. In fact, I did spend a day down at Ordnance Survey headquarters, and actually there's a few tops that I wasn't very happy about. I went and actually consulted the 1 to 10,000 maps down there.
Yeah. So how long did it take to compile the list itself? Can you remember?
It took, I mean, the whole book, I mean, when you think about the 2000s and the 500 metre tops, I think it probably took about 2 years. I didn't hurry it. I just did it in, obviously I was working at the time, and I just did it in the evenings and spare days.
Now, of course, you said working at the time, because I believe you did work down
Yes, I was a civil servant in Cheltenham. I don't think I need to say a lot more about that.
So when did you come up to the lakes?
I came up to the lakes 14 years ago in 1996.
And you're now living in?
I live in Kendal.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic area. We're just on the margin of the Lake District, and of course we've got the Yorkshire Dales just across on the other side.
So as far as the list compilation is concerned, as you were saying, you were working full time then.
Yes.
So was it sort of weekends and evenings that you were
just
doing
holidays.
it?
It initially started, of course, not actually as actually making tables. It was really just because I liked walking the hills, and it was a way of exploring countryside that I wouldn't normally have thought of visiting. And these lists take you to places, fantastic places, that you would never normally think of going. So they're really worthwhile doing.
Now, what about the publication of the list? Was that easy to achieve, or?
Well, what happened, this is a bit of an accident. Initially, I didn't have any intention of publishing a book, but my wife Gillian was talking to a colleague at work who has published books, Richard Sale, on hill walking, and he was shown a copy of the manuscript, and he said, this will probably make a book. So he, in fact, actually offered 3 publishers that I could choose from, which many authors don't have have that luck thrust upon them. So I chose Constable as a publisher, and it's went very well.
Now, of course, the hill lists that are in that book, there's the County Tops England and Wales, 2,000-foot summits England and Wales, the 500-metre hills, whose this interview is
Yes.
concerning, but also notable hills of England and Wales.
I thought, yes, why stop at 500 metres? I thought there are other areas like the Cotswolds, etc., and lower hills, the Malverns, that are fantastic places, and perhaps they needed some sort of listing. And I think, I know that subsequently there have been new lists being published recently which do take in these hills, and they're really worthwhile.
Now, within the 500-metre listing, Michael, there is one summit down in Dartmoor called Great Links Tor,
Yes, right.
which requires climbing to the
does.
top.
Yes.
Now, that's of a similar status to Pillar Rock, within
yes.
the 2,000-foot
Indeed,
list.
indeed.
Now, some authors accept entries that people have completed the listing if they haven't been to the top of Pillar Rock.
Well,
what's your thoughts concerning Great Links
I think
Tor?
if you've taken the trouble and you're keen and you're not necessarily a climber, I think it's probably justified to go as high as you possibly can within safety. And I think it enables people who aren't climbers to actually complete the list. So I think it's justified to actually go to the highest point you can safely, and don't forget you've walked all the way there. So I think it counts.
So, well, that answers that question. Well, Michael, I think for now it's been a pleasure to meet you. I don't know if you've got any sort of last comments concerning your 500-metre list that you'd
well, the only comment
like
I
to
got
share?
is to everybody is to get out there and do them. Not necessarily all of them. Get out and explore. You have a fantastic time.
Lovely. Well, Michael Dewey, many, many thanks.
Thank you very much.